Welcome to the New England Outdoor Life Podcast, where stories, traditions, tips, and tricks come to life by way of those who hunt, fish, guide, trap, and track all over this beautiful region. Join us as we celebrate the outdoor spirit of New England, the New England Outdoor Life Podcast.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of New England Outdoor Life Podcast. I'm Captain Matt, and we're starting a new genre of recording. So we're doing some videography tonight and adding that we do have two guests in, but because of videography, we don't have everybody on camera. So tonight I've got a good friend of mine from right here in Vermont, Andrew Piper. You're from Brandon, Vermont, correct?
Yes, I am.
Good. And behind the scenes, Logan's still with us.
How's it going?
Not on camera because our new studio is set up just for two of us to be on video. But, we have had a bunch of different topics and different people we've interviewed so far. Everything under the sun of recently, taxidermy, snowmobiling, obviously hunting. But I wanted to get local flair. And, Logan met you going on, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And you've certainly got a lot of local knowledge on waterways here in central Vermont. And a lot of the tactics and ideas that we'll talk about tonight can be used in many other bodies of water. But instead of having a professional guide, charter captain, I wanted somebody with just local knowledge. And we're not going to dig you for any special secrets of your honey hole. But for those of you listening in Vermont, we pretty much fish the Central Lakes region, Dunmore, St. Catherine, Bombazine, and there's plenty of others around that have just as good of fishing. But understanding the body of water and what you learn from not only ice season, but in open water as well. So tell us a little bit about your fishing history, Andrew.
Oh, geez. Ice fishing for me started real young. I would say I was around 8 years old or so. And I remember going with my brother and one of his friends, and I just thought it was so neat to be able to walk around and do, fish exactly where you wanted, because at that time I probably wasn't very good at flipping a lure to where I wanted to be, and I took to it from there. I can remember my dad, my winter breaks in school, he'd drop me off with a 5-gallon pail, a couple tip-ups and some bait, and he'd pick me back up on his way home from work, and you'd freeze to death. And it was a lot of trial and error with a lot of error to start, for sure. But fortunate enough to catch some nice fish here and there, and
Sure.
And the passion's still a fire in me for sure.
Well, we were talking earlier on the importance of starting people young, and obviously not only is Logan one of our key partners in what he does here with the podcast, my guide service, but he started going with me when he was little. And your son Hudson's doing the same thing, and he's learning and getting that itch already. How old is he?
He's going to be 8 in June. And, there's not a moment I don't come through the door from work or on a Saturday morning when he gets up. Are we going fishing? And
Awesome.
Makes it easy to go,
Sure.
For sure.
Well, you guys fish today. Here we are recording in the mid part of February. We are finally had a traditional winter. We've got great ice. We've now got a new spin of challenge called snow.
Yeah.
That most of the Northeast got pummeled in the last couple of storms. So it's added some challenge of transportation, being able to get on the ice. A lot of drifts in some places now that you got to fight with. But so conditions vary from body of water to body of water. But I had other things to do today, but you guys fished today. And Logan, you guys had how many flags today?
Over 20, I'd say, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and for a bluebird day, post cold front, we had a lot of wind last couple of days.
Yeah.
A lot of good class fish, too.
You guys really got in some great fish.
Yeah.
Hudson got a couple of nice ones today, didn't he?
Yeah, he had himself a day for sure. Started the morning of first flag, I believe it was,
Yeah,
of the
first
day.
flag.
Was a 5-pound smallmouth bass. So that was that struck the day off good, and ended up I think he got 7 other Lakers, one of them being in that 8-pound range. The rest of them were all 5, 6, 7.
Sure.
Couple pike, 2 other bass, 2 small salmon, I believe, between him and Logan. So
there's an irony right there.
Yeah.
Just what you're talking about. that dispels any rumor that you can only catch certain species in certain spots.
Yeah, I think if you're targeting, pike and bass in general in shallow water, you're probably not going to get a lot of trout, but we're targeting smallmouth in that 25 to 35 foot range, which shortly after that is 50 feet of water, and the lake trout and salmon are right there. And, the natural bait pushing up to those shelves and the fish go crazy. And as long as you got one sitting there, I think, your odds are pretty well.
Sure. One of the things that we have talked about, the three of us, and you've obviously taught Logan a lot for a couple of bodies of water around here. And it's certainly not to put down any of the bait dealers around, but the importance of catching bait in a body of water that you're actually fishing, how that makes a difference with what the game species they are going to target. Any suggestions with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people when you talk about this, they're thinking smelt, and in my opinion, smelt fishing is very tough at times, but it's I believe if you can catch smelt out of the body of water you're fishing, your odds, double of catching fish, and all fish. I mean, not just smelt for trout and salmon, smelt for bass and pike. We know the pike love smelt because we get mad when they steal our bait all the time, and we're catching a 3-pound pike trying to catch a 3-pound salmon. Sure. But it not only that. I mean, when you're targeting pike and bass, catching perch, using those for bait, natural fish to them. As long as it's legal to use as a bait fish, anything that you can catch that's legal to use out of that body of water will definitely up your odds. Saw that earlier on in my ice fishing when I was targeting big pike and, catching big pike on big perch. And sure. You'd wait a long time, but when you got one, you got a good one. Sure. And bass too, catching bass on pike. Sure. Or, bass on perch for bait. So, sure.
A lot of our listeners around New England may or may not have bodies of water where they can catch smelt, and we're fortunate enough. We've got a handful here in our region in Vermont, Bombazine, Dunmore, the Rescue Chain of Lakes, Ludlow area, Chemo, they've got smelt over there. Of course, the Northeast Kingdom, most of the lakes up there, Seymour, Willoughby, Maidstone, they're all going to have smelt up there.
Yeah, and up there you can buy smelt, and you can't down here. So
got it. So knowing the body of water and how to catch smelt, how to be able to catch your own bait. We all talk about the heydays of catching smelt on Champlain, and since the alewife invasion, that's become a big struggle to be able to catch smelt there. But the irony is that those bait profiles have changed from one body of the water to the next. How, as the season goes on, those other species will also migrate or go where that bait is.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of lakes get notoriety for being a target lake for one specific trophy species, whether it be lake trout in Dunmore, big northerns in Glen Lake, big bass in Bombazine, whatever. But there's other species that don't get the notoriety because they may or may not get targeted there too.
Right.
And I can tell you just about every lake in our region can probably put up a pike pushing 20 pounds. In a lot of places people don't know that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not uncommon to be salmon fishing, out in 70, 80 feet of water with smelt, 3 to 5 feet down, and hook into a 15 plus pound northern. A couple of guys that fished close to me last year. Well, he got one that never got a tape or a scale, but I bet was pushing that 20 number. Good friend of mine, for sure. And they're there, and where there's bait, there's fish, and that's the key.
You and I were talking a little bit earlier on, all depending on what region you go to, of what state around. Pike can be a swear word, or they can be a hallelujah. You know, and for a lot of the guys that targeted trout, especially in northern New Hampshire and Maine. When a pike came in, they flip out. Of course, the bass guys don't like them in the tournament world, but the three of us do love catching them. You know? I don't keep a ton of them. Might keep, and again, we talk about the harvest, and we're going to discuss that later on this evening. But even in the spring and fall, when I'm guiding on open water, I prefer to keep a pike in that 24 to 27 inch range. I'm going to let those big female breeders go. Get a picture, and if you really want to get something out, you can get a reproduction gun anyways. But,
right.
Unfortunately with pike, a lot of people feel that those biggest fish, because they're easier to fillet, you're going to get more meat off from them, but you're also harvesting those big spawning females too. So,
Yeah.
there's topics of discussion. There's, pluses and minuses no matter where you go.
Yeah, there's definitely my opinion on eater fish is probably different than somebody else's. And, my opinion is eater fish, breeder fish, and you keep the eater fish and let the breeder fish go. And
Bingo.
And that's my opinion. My son caught a little over 9-pound lake trout a couple of weekends ago at a Dunmore, and I've been telling him, you get a big 10 or so, we'll get one on the wall for you. And I was, Logan was there, and I was like, what do you think, buddy? I think we should let her go, and a bigger one will grow. And he's like, let's let her go, and away it went.
Hallelujah. So, yeah. It's obviously the catch and release phenomenon, whether it's open water or ice. More and more people are really pushing that. Conservation is one of our mantras here in New England Outdoor Life, and encouraging people to keep the tradition alive of whatever sport they're doing, but thinking about how do we conserve and protect species and encourage that growth down the road. And obviously a huge difference when you're talking a stocked species versus something that's natural reproduction.
Right.
And all of our bodies of water around here, bass and pike are natural reproduction, So being selective about how people look at the numbers of fish and listening to the biology too. And
Right.
biologists have done a lot to look at different bodies of water, that some of them have got an abundance of stunted, largemouths. Kent Pond was an example where the state really pushed to say, hey, keep a bunch of those 10 to 12 inch bass because there's thousands of them in here.
Right.
We got to thin them out. So every body of water is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's like the bait fish, in my opinion, and Dunmore, the smelt. As we catch them, it seems like every year they're getting a half inch shorter, and I recently rigged up basically a regular boat fish finder in my shanty just to see what was going on when we were trying to catch them, and you'll go from 20 feet below the ice to the bottom, no matter where you are in water, and it's just red with smelt. And it's like, man, you could keep 1 billion of these things, and it's not going to change a thing in here.
Yep.
And stands the reason why it's hard days out there a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's a common discussion. I have that with my clients in the summertime that, find the bait, find the target species, but some days matching the pattern or getting to exactly what they want when you're seeing nothing but miles of bait on the screen, whether it's Dunmore, Champlain, or Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
It's not always the best thing because you're competing with all that food source they got there too, so adds to the challenge of what we do. And you're primarily a tip-up fisherman, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you do much jigging at all for any species? Or?
No, just for smelt. In the spring, every now and then, we'll try for some perch or something like that. Yeah. But not too often.
Yep. Well, that I find that 90% of the old school fishermen around here are used to going out getting bait from either stuff that they trapped years ago or buying from a bait shop. Setting up tip ups in the family atmosphere, going out waiting for a flag and checking what's there and stuff. And
run.
The run. You
Yep.
got it. And you and Logan have got permanent shanties on the lake you guys are fishing, and I think that's the interesting part of permanent shanties and having locales where years ago we talked about the shanty towns you would see on any lake, and that's a discussion on all of the forums out there that I can remember the shanty towns that used to be at the bridge on Champlain back in the smelt days.
Oh, yeah.
But today you've still got what I'll call a traditional hard side shanty that's on rails or runners that you built.
Yep.
Where Logan has got what a lot of guys are going to now is a retrofitted pop-up camper. You take the old pop-up section out of it and build a frame on it, so now you can tow it with your vehicle and go from one place to the next.
Yep.
But the downside of that, and Logan, firsthand, that takes more than a small tricycle to pull her out on the lake. And you got to have enough ice to have a side-by-side or a truck to pull something out on the lake. And up until this year, the last 2 years, we haven't had that.
Yeah, it's been the last 4 years have been tough for where we fish to try to get shanties out. I think mine is last year it made it out for 8 hours, and I had to do it.
Yeah.
And the year before, I think it made it maybe a week, and then the weather turned and it was getting sketchy, and
Sure.
and off it went. But yeah, the hard shanties are tough. We have portable setups and that's tough as well. Staying dry, they're warm, but they're not feet warm.
Yeah.
And
I can tell our listeners, you've got a hard side shanty that looks like a mini log cabin. You've really dressed it up nice.
Yep.
All the pictures and paraphernalia you got in the inside, you got a wood stove in it. And that's the old school shanty that I remember as a kid. I used to love to go visit with people, just hop from shanty to shanty to see what people had in there. And, you see them today that, people got bunks built into them, custom lighting systems. And it's that nostalgia of the old school style of fishing that you got to have the ice conditions to be able to do it. And you told me today how much ice you think we've got right now.
We're looking at about 14 inches. Yeah. There's about 6 to 8 inches of slop on top, and then 4 to 6 inches of snow on that as well. But by the end of the day, even with the sun coming out, getting up to in the 20s, it was stiffening up. We could stay on top walking. Four-wheeler snowmobiles were still breaking in a little bit, but I think by the end of the week, it'll be good and hard, and the machines will stay back on, which will make more ice, which is not great ice, but it's good enough ice to help protect the good ice that's below it if we get warm spells and rain and stuff as we enter spring.
Sure.
For sure.
For your style of fishing, especially Dunmore being your hometown water, if you will, about 5 miles from your home. The guys that want to stay more portable, especially fishing for panfish, the tent style, shanty obviously adds that mobility.
Absolutely.
Logan, you've had some years that when you got the new shanty, you were able to hit 3 bodies of water that winter because it was on wheels, and we did Dunmore, Bombazine, and Chittenden Dam all in 1 year with that shanty. You were able to follow the species in a hot bite. You've gotten into a groove that you like, and you're keeping your shanty on 1 body of water, and you've got a mission, and you know what it is, and that's to target one specific species and try and get that trophy this year. So you've gone back and forth and where you want to keep it. You think that you're going to probably end up staying there the rest of the season, or is she going to go to one more spot this winter?
No, I'll probably camp out right where I am. I'll probably move it, I'd like to move it hopefully this weekend closer to some bass water. Just when you're trout and salmon fishing, it's not very uncommon. I mean, you can ask Andrew, 2 flag day. Like last Friday, I fished dark to dark, and I had 2 flags in 10 hours.
That was my deciding factor Saturday at about noon when it was about 23rd hour with 2 flags, and I said time for a change. And usually I would stick it out, but again, having a small son who is a busybody, finding some more busy water where we can do both was on my mind. And
when I was guiding, as a lot of our listeners know, this was our first year of the last 5 or 6 years. We decided not to guide ice fishing, as much a personal reason as it is liability for insurance with the sketchy ice conditions. And of course, here we are, winter.
Then we get 2 feet of ice.
Yep, we're back traditional winter. I don't have a trail sled anymore. It's one of my first years. I wish I was back in the snowmobiling because the topics right now of the snowmobile world, everybody in the Northeast saying this best ride they've seen in 10 years, and I believe it. The trails are groomed like glass right now. So, was it just a cycle of a couple of years of El Nino that we had some rotten winters? Time will tell if we got 2 or 3 more good, ice years. But, you were saying that slush, that the snow insulates the ice. You end up getting some slush. Well, that'll harden up, and that's going to add to our ice depth.
Yeah.
And I really think we'll see some fishing right into March this year.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people, that aren't avid ice fishermen that want to get into it also need to understand that, with this slush and the snow on top, it does take old tip-up holes and make them an 8-inch hole into a 12-inch hole. You're not going to fall completely through the ice. You might get your boot wet. But it does create some weird spots, and knowing your body of water is key. I actually went right to my waist today with 1 leg in my tip-up hole from last weekend. So
there you go.
It's
there's an example. That was an 8-inch auger hole.
8-inch auger hole, and with the rain and snow we got last weekend, I hadn't been out after Saturday till today, and my son was fighting a fish, and I just actually went to step and kneel down and grab the fish, and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm sinking.
Yeah.
You know, it's like super slow motion for me, but it does make, you know, there was probably an inch of ice froze over it, and you know, had that not happened today, by Saturday it would be froze hard, and that would have never happened. But it's good to be mindful if you see wet spots to just go around them. You know, it doesn't hurt to walk an extra 10 feet.
Sure. You know, Logan, one of the other things that you did before the last two big storms, and for our region, we've gotten about a foot of snow in the last two storms. Some places have doubled that. Yeah. But you went up and moved your shanty a little bit because of a warm spell. And why'd you do that?
Well, the past 2 nights before I moved it, when I jigged for smelt, I took on quite a bit of water, which is just bubbling up through from pressure of the shanty sitting there. And most nights, by the time you leave, it's already freezing back over. But over time, especially with mine, with his runners, it's not as big of a deal. You can chip the runners out and normally snap it. But with tires, you let yourself get in too far, and then you're into a chip race, and it's just a pain in the butt. So I went up before that other big storm and moved mine only 10 feet. But it's enough to get it out of the old spots, at least.
We've had 48 hours of some of the ruggedest winds we've had all winter long.
Yeah.
What's the importance of anchoring those big shanties down?
Oh, I'm not a good example of that. I don't put a rope on mine, but mine's fairly heavy, and usually I only put one 2x4 under it. So I usually let about a half a runner. I have steel 2x4 runners made out of steel, and there's air gaps between them. So I usually let about a half a runner freeze in, and mine. No, I shouldn't say this, but typically won't slide unless you get it off the 2x4s. Yep. But wheeled shanties for sure. You know, a lot of my friends and fellow fishermen have them, and they will move, especially if you have them up on top of the ice with blocks under the wheels.
Yep.
You know, a good hard wind will spin them right around 180.
Oh, won't it? I've seen it. Yeah. Yep. I'll tell you, for the listeners out there that ever think about doing a hard shanty, a little tactic that, you know, we learned years ago is taking some polyethylene rope, going to all four corners of the shanty, or if it's an old pop-up camper, drilling holes in the ice and tying a 2x4, dropping it down in the water, then drawing that 2x4 up horizontally under the ice, tying the propylene rope tight to the corner. Once that freezes in, there's your anchor.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's good. She's not going anywhere. And we've tried other types of anchoring where you just put the screws in, and the wind's going to work those apart.
Yeah, you know, I've even seen it in my pop-up, you know, portable shanties when, you know, if you get a warm day, the wind's blowing, and you can bury that anchor in there, but all of a sudden that eggs out an inch around, and you know, the shanty blows off you as you're sitting in there. It's like, oh my God. But paying attention to ice conditions is very, very important, no matter what level of experience you have, you know. That
and your state regulations on when they require hard shanties to be off.
Yeah.
And the last couple of years hasn't been an issue because most people aren't putting them out this year. A lot of them out there, and knowing that by mid-March you got to have them off the ice. And again, knowing whether you're in New Hampshire, Maine, Mass, or wherever else, and what are their requirements to get them off the ice.
And one thing I really like to see is, you know, people picking up after themselves. You know, sometimes you'll break something on your shanty, or, you know, I've seen people with outdoor little fire pits, and, you know, just be courteous and pick your stuff up. And I've never had too much trouble with that myself, and never really seen a lot of it, but every now and then, you know, see a can flying around here, just pick it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's, sadly, I think no matter what the topic is, you're going to get that 2% of bad apples out there. And a couple of years ago, a guide buddy of mine on Champlain, who's a big perch jigging guy when we got ice, that's all he does. But he picked up just shy of 22-pound LP cylinders throughout the winter of guys going out fishing and leaving them on the ice.
That's crazy.
That's insanity. I hate that. You know, there's no excuse for that. No excuse for littering. No excuse for catching fish and leaving them in the state parking lot. If you're not going to fillet them up, don't keep them, you know. And I've seen a lot of that too. So we try to encourage people to think about the conservation mind of things in many different ways. But you know, you and I were talking a little earlier tonight about tips and tactics. You know, you talked about catching bait from your own water, but what are some little things that have helped you improve your success rate, especially when it comes to targeting trout and salmon?
Yeah, one thing I like to do, I run heritage tip ups, and was talking with Logan earlier. I've had every tip up under the sun. And part of the reason for that is when I started ice fishing, I started with T-Jacks and made them all myself. My dad had a half a box of oak flooring in his garage, and I didn't ask him, but I built tip-ups out of them. And
Sure.
And so I started with that anyways. And then I had the 40 ups. I really enjoyed those. Somebody thought they were theirs and not mine. Parked at my dad's one time. So I ended up buying the Heritages, and, salmon and trout are fairly finicky. Salmon, especially with soft mouths, and they feel the slightest thing and they're gone. They're spitting it if they're not hooked. And I like to take the trigger mechanism, and there's a little hook on that. I like to file that off so it's straight. Make sure your spring on your flag is turned to the off position or on position, I guess, flag on instead of off. Sure. I like to load them right up with line. I run 30-pound ice line, and I run about I like to vary my leaders, anywhere from 6-pound to 8-pound fluorocarbon. I run them anywhere from 2-foot leader to a 10-foot leader, and a lot of that is, in my opinion, is for the action of the smaller bait.
Sure.
So your barrel swivel is always in use and not wrapped around your tip up.
Yep.
And how many times do you get to a tip up if it's not like that, and the fish is spun around the hole all day and it's knotted up in 1,400 loops.
Yep.
And it's right back up under the ice or in the hole even sometimes.
Yep. How far of a leader do you like from your barrel swivel to your bait?
So from my barrel swivel, I'll change it anywhere from like 2 feet to like 7 or 10 feet.
Yep.
A lot of, salmon fishing, I'm on a typical year, we're fishing from right under the ice to about 5 feet down. You definitely can get them in that 7 to 10, 15, 20 range.
Yep.
So that's also a good way for me to mix things up in the morning. If my leaders are different lengths, I'm not fishing all tip ups at the same depth.
There you go.
And because everybody knows that's a common ice fisherman that did I put that last one at 20 or did I put it at 15? Oh,
Sure.
crap. And
It's like with me running a spread on Lake Ontario. I got a 10-rod spread. Well, one's down so far deep with this leader back, and
Right.
you almost got to write stuff down,
Yeah.
how far out, where you set them, what your lengths are, and everything else.
It's not so bad when you're running 8 tip ups, but now that my son's going, you run 16. I'm like, crap, do I got 8 out for salmon or 6?
Sure.
But I run number 4 to number 4, number 6 octopus circle hooks. One thing I feel is very important is snelling your own hook.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer in how that hooks into the fish. I don't want to say every time, but it's a majority. The way the hook turns, and if you feel them, you usually have them, unless you do something wrong fighting the fish or the line gets hung up. They're usually there.
Yep.
Explain what that means, because I wouldn't even know what they mean.
So when you snell a hook, it's actually tied to the shank of the hook and not to the eye. A fisherman's knot's a great fisherman knot. It's a great fishing knot for lures in that aspect, or bullhead fishing, or that matter. But when it's tied right to the shank, it has a angled head on it. So then when you pull on the line, and with octopus circle hooks, you do not set the hook like you would think you would like your bass fishing. You don't yank it. It's just steady pressure. You just pulling the line back to you. When you feel pressure, the fish, let them go. But it pulls on the shank, and with the angled circled hook, it'll turn the hook into the fish's mouth instead of away from the fish's mouth.
Yep.
I don't know who figured that out, but they were a smart man. I found as long as you tie them like that, it's pretty flawless.
There's a lot of YouTube videos out there for people that want to learn how to snell hooks, but a lot of the trolling guys, especially salmon or trolling for salmon with cut bait on the Great Lakes, snelling your own trebles is pretty key, or buying the ones that are snelled.
Yeah.
Like you said, makes a big difference on how that hook set goes, and drilling that hook straight and getting that nice tight hook in.
Yeah, and your leader is, in my opinion, is equally as important. The strength of it for what you're catching. No, you have to know how much you can really pull or and whatnot, but also for the action of your minnow. You know, these small 2.5, 3-inch minnows, you want them as lively as you can. And if they got a 20-pound leader on them that's just weighing them down, they're not going to last all day. And they're so finicky. I mean, my opinion's, I fish a lot with smelt, and if you touch them things for more than 3 seconds, you might as well throw it to the eagle because it's not going to live.
Not going to live down there. Yep. How do you prefer to hook the bait?
So, Logan and I were talking about this earlier, and earlier in my ice fishing years, when I fish pike, I like to hook them right behind the head because pike, from everything you can read, say they catch them, they kill them, and they turn around and eat them head first.
You got it.
And that was hard to get used to me when I switched to trout fishing because, you'd get a pike flag and you might have this 10-inch perch on for bait, and you'd have to let that thing run until he stopped. And then I'd sit there and sit there and sit there. And then all of a sudden it'd start moving again. And in my brain, whether it was happening or not, I was saying, okay, he turned around, he's eating it head first. Now it's go time.
Yep.
And you'd set the hook. Whereas with trout, I don't wait. When I get there, tip up's out, and I'm just steady pull on the line. So I went from the head to now I like to hook back by the dorsal fin with these smaller minnows because I feel like the trout and salmon, they're not wasting any time. They're swallowing them. They're a good sized trout, good sized salmon. They're going pretty deep in their mouth. A lot of the ones we got today they were hooked nice right in the corner of the mouth. But I also have a second theory on that with these finicky smelt, when you hook them up by the head, and I still catch myself doing it at times, they die faster.
Of course you do.
And
I've even noticed if you hook them too deep.
oh yeah, deep's a bad thing too. And
You like to skin hook them forward or behind the dorsal?
forward.
Yep.
Just under that backbone, if you can almost see it in a smelt, just
You
roll
can.
it up
Yeah.
under that.
Got it. Getting that meat just above the backbone.
I would say 50% of the ones I hook in the morning are probably on the lighter side of being where if they don't hit them square, you're not going to get them. The bait's off. And
Sure.
we had a handful of them today that were like that, got their 0 line out, smelt gone. And I was like, yeah, that one was a little too shallow, but it's a fine line. And cause if you get anywhere near that backbone, they're done. The bigger ones we call dog smelt. They're a little hardier.
Yep.
At times I'll even take I'll take my number 6 or 4 hook off. I'll tie like a number 4 treble, and I will hook that. I'll take the number 4 treble, tie that on, then I'll tie like a 6-inch leader right to one of the bottom of the hooks on the treble, and then put a number 4, and I'll hook the treble right up by the dorsal fin and the number 4 right in back of the head.
Yep.
But they've got to be like 12 inches, 10 inches for me to do that.
If you look to like the old guys that sewed smelt, that was an old trolling tactic that very few people do today, but was so popular, especially again, northern Maine, the Northeast Kingdom. That was, they sewed that line through the fish and snelled that hook on the tail of it. And, makes a big difference on how that fish, trolls and travels. It's no different.
Yeah.
If you've got a double setup there, you're going to get twice the hookup ratio.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it certainly makes a difference there. Logan, you were talking, I can remember a couple of years ago, clients were asking you about how you would rig stuff going with smaller leader and smaller hooks, knowing you were getting better walleye bites on the walleye waters we fish, better lake trout.
I was getting better bites everywhere as the more
A lot of times you were out fishing a lot of your buds that were going with you, but you had 2 things. You went to smaller leaders and you were set up earlier than everybody else. And that's a key factor too. You guys certainly know it's not easy to get up 3:34 in the morning in the middle of the winter and get out there at first light. Most ice fishing people this time of year, it's a summer or a wintertime hobby. They wait and get out on the ice 8 o'clock in the morning. They're having some beers, cook out around noon, but they haven't had a flag.
Most times the magic hour, I feel like that first 45 minutes of daylight can be crucial some days. You can get them 3-4 flags in maybe if you're lucky, and then you might not have anything the rest of the day. Or it can be like today where the morning was kind of slow, to be honest.
It was a little slow this morning.
10:30 to 3 was bang, bang, bang.
You know, one of the things that, a lot of guys will talk about is the barometric pressure. And I certainly think this time of year with ice makes a lot more difference with the fish and their bite. And today I was coming off from working a long shift last night when you guys were telling me how many fish you're catching. For 2 seconds, I meant to pull over and look at my phone and see what the barometer was doing today. And my good friend Shane Mucky out in New York says he keeps incredible records of walleye fishing Lake Oneida. And knowing that barometer that he really likes, that 30.05 area is, pretty hot. And when you get under 30 down the 29s, things wane off. When you get up above 31, it wanes off. It's being in that sweet spot a lot of times. And that's when you'll see, obviously a falling barometer is generally better than a climbing barometer, so. But it changes from day to day, and you and I were talking about oxygen levels in the water this time of year too. Is totally different than first ice is, say in December, versus late ice right before ice out in late March.
Yeah,
so
I've never done a lot with the barometric pressure. I do have some notes I've jotted down, and up until the last couple of years, and we haven't really had really good winters either, but if I was going to take a day off 5 years ago to go ice fishing for salmon and lake trout, it would have had to been 5 below and the wind blowing 30 miles an hour. And everyone thought I was crazy. Yeah. And you always caught some fish, and they weren't always big, or they're never always big. But something about I say the more miserable it is out there, the better the fishing is. Sure. And then today was the exact opposite. It was freezing cold this morning. It was
better this morning. -1.
Brutal. The bait pails were freezing solid, and
sure.
and then as soon as that sun came up, it was like game on. So I'm 100% sure the barometric pressure has an influence on it. Yeah. But I kind of when I took to ice fishing, I kind of took to it as I'm going every day I can, no matter what. And and if I catch them, I catch them. If I don't, I don't.
Sure.
And I'll try again tomorrow. And I think being humble with it like that is what keeps it fun.
Sure.
I
think that ice fishing is also, as you just said, this time of year, you can set up your shanty, or you're going to hit a local body of water. Something you can do just about any day you got a day off.
Yeah.
You're not planning your vacation around it, or not looking for exactly the prime days or whatever.
Yeah.
Versus the guy who's going on the hunting trip. He's got his room or plate paid for, his guide bought, whatever,
right,
in this window, and you got to go no matter what the weather and barometer is doing.
Right.
So, that's the advantage of having everything there, and you can kind of look at the whole season and say what were the good days, what were the bad days, and what coincided with those bites with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously each species of fish is much different. When I fish northerns, I wouldn't take a day off unless it was 45 and pouring rain. When the water was going down the holes,
Yep.
It was like, hang on, you're gonna lots of numbers that day.
I can remember a day on Dunmore, and this was a while ago. It was probably in my college years, traditional winter, because we were driving vehicles all over Dunmore, and it was late spring, probably second or third week of March. It had over 20 inches of ice, but it was one of those days the water was running in the holes. Snow, it was melting off the ice big time that day. It was so hot and warm. I say, for ice fishing, it was in the 40s, bluebird day, and we chased flags all day long. The perch bite was phenomenal. We were fishing shallows, looking for, bass, perch, and pike. And Brian and I had probably one of the best days we ever had on that lake.
Yeah,
it was just crazy fishing. So
the best lake trout and salmon day I ever had was with a friend of mine, Rob, and it was, I think the air temp was around that 10 to 15 below without the wind, and it was like a 15 to 20 mile an hour wind, and we set up 8 tip ups a piece, and we never rebaited a one. We had to chase a couple down that blew up out of the hole and were blowing across the ice because there was no snow on the lake.
That's hardcore.
And we never rebaited a tip up, and I think we went 14 for 16 that day, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was, by the end of the day, when we would catch the fish or whatever, lose the fish, whatever. One of us would run to the shanty with the tip up in their hand, and the other guy would string the line and let it go blow across the lake, and we'd sit in the shanty and wind the tip up with the wood stove going so it wouldn't freeze, make a big ball.
Yeah.
And oh man, it was fun, but it was brutal.
Sure. That's not for the faint of heart. That's hardy fishing.
No,
there.
that was one of those days you could look around and be like, "Are we the only ones crazy enough to be out here right now?" And the answer was yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Earlier tonight, you and I were also talking about the change in I'll call it the ice fishing tournament scene. We all grew up in the days of the big boards where you had, the top 5 fish of every species and how many people got involved with it. And those type of tournaments have kind of starting to change the tide a little bit. With the advent of apps such as Fish Donkey that people can do catch and release, they can measure it. But again, understanding the fishing pressure. And obviously, when you're looking at panfish and a lot of the ice tournaments out there where the guys are going out and jigging, certain little bodies of water can get pounded fast.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't take long for guys to not only go to a tournament and realize how good the fishing is, but people see that, and all of a sudden, for the next 3 weeks straight, people are pounding those fish there. But what's your feeling with the change in those ice tournaments that have gone on?
I think the catch and release tournament style is awesome. I've done quite a few fishing derbies, and the camaraderie, the fun. It's I think everybody in the world should experience it at least once.
Absolutely.
But when you go up to a derby headquarters on Sunday at 4:00 and there's 3 people left and their fish are stacked up like cordwood underneath there and nobody's taking their fish home, that's kind of like we're doing it for the wrong reason at that point to me. I love catching fish. I am by not at all a super big fish eater.
Yep.
My son is a very big fish eater, and my daughter as well. I eat plenty of fish, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to keep every fish I catch.
Sure.
And we had talked earlier that there's the eaters and the breeders, and I just feel like, a slot limit on some of these different species to let a 2.5 pound northern swim away or, stuff like that, I think makes a big difference. And I think it helps each body of water.
Sure.
Primarily fishing Lake Dunmore, I would see after the last, after any derby we had, but, we haven't had one in a few years, the weekend to 3 weekends after that, the lake was dead. There was nobody there, and there was no fish. I mean, not that there wasn't any fish, but it was just the lake had been hammered.
Sure.
And you could tell.
Yep.
And for these guys that want to catch their fish, keep them and eat them, I am all for that 100%. Yep. I'm just not all for hanging them on the board for an hour, letting them get thrown underneath the board and nobody coming back for them.
Sure.
That's just my opinion.
I can remember as a kid going to the Great Benson Derby when it was at Benson Landing on Lake Champlain, and the lake was totally different back then. Not only the fishery was different, we didn't have alewives yet. We had more traditional winters. Our walleye populations were much better then. And there would be, as you said, hundreds of people standing around that board, snowmobiles, four-wheelers, and TV crews sometimes, and everybody there to see that. And that, in some regions around North America, is still very popular. You go out to Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Michigan, those type of derbies are still very popular. But it seems though around here with ice conditions, when we know the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of the ice derbies have gotten canceled because of ice safety issues. So I think participation is kind of weighing back on that. But, with the summertime tournament series, Major League Fishing has really kind of put a new spin. And since their inception of the catch and release live competition, where not only the guys in the boat know what their competition is doing, with those fish getting a chance to go back and swim away too, it's getting people to continue to think about that conservation, and a lot of the topics that have so much to do with bodies of water, from overpopulation to stunted fish to overfishing, change in aquatic life. When we started talking about, the harvesting of weeds, which is a massive issue here in our region of Vermont.
Oh, for sure.
We have battled tooth and nail to keep Lake Bombazine chemical free, where Dunmore sadly has had some treatment. St. Catherine's had a ton of it. The smalley fishing, brown trout fishing stayed very strong. they're a nomadic fish. They don't rely on those weeds.
Right.
Where the largies, the crappie, the pike, you've seen those numbers go down because they don't have the weed structure anymore.
Yeah.
So, again, I tell any person that's listening, really get to learn your body of water. If you got favorites, probably if you're an avid ice fisherman, you already got those little favorites and secret honey holes, not telling anybody. But what's some tactics people can do in the summertime when they're out in a canoe, kayak, or boat that'll help them ice fishing?
You know what? I'll start with like pike. Trout and salmon waters actually are, they're tough in the kayak canoe. It's deep water. You're just looking at the black abyss below you. But pike looking for the weed beds. I used to say pike had runways like deer through the weeds, and if you found a good one, you would always get fish there. And what mainly that means is like it could be a weed bed on the edge of a sandbar, and then it goes quickly back to weeds, a little 6 foot, 7 foot opening. Finding things like that, underwater structure is obviously phenomenal for bass, stumps, rock ledges, shelves. Yep. I'd like to say figure out where the bait is, but in a lot of these lakes, the bait is everywhere, and that's what makes it tough to catch them.
Sure.
That's what, when I go out in my little boat in the summer, I just pay a lot of attention to the water to see it, and it will change. The weed beds change. They get thicker, they get thinner, or they massacre them all.
Sure.
One of my favorite spots I used to northern fish, it's a sandbar.
Yep.
And you still get them in there, but there's not as many perch in there. There's not as many bluegill, crappie, and why would they be in there when they can be out everywhere else that there is weeds doing that?
Yep. I think that you talk about Dunmore, and I fish that open water a lot. Not only have the weeds changed there in a lot of spots on the lake from weed control, but with the smelt population, especially when it comes to northerns, the best ones are the nomadic ones.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the ones that are out cruising or they'll smell.
Yeah.
I get a lot of the hammer-handled pike that stay close to weed beds all the time.
Yeah.
But those big pike are out cruising.
Yeah.
They're out looking for fish where they can find bait. A lot of times, as you said, closer to deep water drop-offs. But thinking about the time of year, you and I were talking about lake trout and how this time of year, now we're approaching the second half of winter, as they're going to get closer to spring, they're going to be sneaking into shallows. Where we spring troll, you're going to find a lot of your trout and salmon under 20 foot of water. They're right where that warmest water is going to be.
Yeah, and with a place like Dunmore that has so much bait, you can almost envision the trout running them up to those shallows out of that 50, 60 feet of water, and that ball of bait runs right into a 20-foot wall of ledge that comes up to 20 feet deep or so. Then the trout just have a heyday.
Sure.
And that's kind of what we did today, and it was 4 to 6 tip ups, less than 20 yards apart on that shelf, and it was nonstop. And,
Yep.
And nonstop action, and I think as like you say, as spring goes on, they're going to move in there, and even in the fall, late fall trolling, it's a great idea to do that as well.
Absolutely.
As the water starts to go the other way, it's that intermediate temperature.
You got it.
So,
yeah, I've got a fall pike trolling program I do exclusively on Champlain, and it's knowing where my weed beds meet structure, and I'm trolling the parallel edges of that.
yeah,
And as every day the light gets a little shorter and the water cooler, that pike bite just turns on.
Yeah.
I tell everybody that if you're an avid fall fisherman, but you're a deer hunter too, it's a battle. What you want to be doing,
Yeah.
Smalley and northern fishing on Champlain's the best in November.
Oh, I'm sure it
I
is.
tell every soul out there, you're not going to find me on the lake. I'm going to be in a tree or a mountainside somewhere. So
Yeah.
just the way it goes.
Yeah, I have a couple friends that are like, "Why do you deer hunt? The fishing's just getting good." I'm like, "Because I've had all year to fish. I can only get a month to deer hunt."
You got it. Amen.
Or a couple months, anyways.
Yep. If you had to pick a week that, you would say is your favorite all winter long ice fishing, when is it?
Well, I probably couldn't pick a week, I could say, but I can say as soon as the ice will hold me is on trout water. That's my favorite time. Logan and I fished the day after Christmas. Yeah. Something like that for some pike. We just to get the lines wet.
Sure.
But yeah, when I was a little younger and didn't have a family, it wouldn't be a surprise to see me on a, you know, 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, 2 inches of ice and 80 feet of water. And boy, the fishing's good. I wouldn't recommend everybody do that or anybody do that because it's really not great. And you really have to know your body of water to do that.
I was just going to say, from an ice safety standpoint, you know, and Dunmore is one of those places that's got springs.
It's got bad spots.
Yep, you got to know where you're going, and you've put probably more time in than 95% of the people that fish that lake. But, you know, Logan's learned, you know, not only from my tutelage over the years, but, you know, paying attention, having a float suit, having spikes with him, spudding everywhere he goes on early ice. But there is a rush to watching fish come up through black ice that you can see. Them. It is so cool.
Yeah. Last year, we one of the first days we went out, we had like a 3 or 4 salmon day, and it was pretty sunny, you know, breaks of sun, but it just worked out a couple times where when we were hauling in a fish, the sun poked out, and when they were within that 10 feet of you at the hole, it was like just glowing, and I was like, this is so cool. And I mean, there was like 6 inches then, but it was completely see-through.
Sure.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And, you know, anybody that's doesn't even ice fish a lot gets all wound up when they say, like, oh my God, he's over here. You know, it's cool.
It is. Yeah. You know, again, this year we've had that return of cold that just about every place around here is fishable.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys in Lake George is notorious for springs and some drop offs and ice safety issues, but pretty much the whole lake has gotten good fishing on it now. And just a couple of weeks ago, guys were going out to their jigging spots, and one of my buddies is a YouTuber, and he was watching these Lakers come up from 20 foot below the ice.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, just pure black ice in the shade, and he's got it all on video. You know, it's pretty cool stuff.
Well, and the other thing too, right now with these cold winter like this winter, and not a real warm spell, is the clarity of the water.
Sure.
is super clear. I think that can help you with things and hurt you with things too. But you definitely notice, you know, when you get them warm spells, and, you know, a lot of these lakes have inlets and outlets, and the water will mud up, and, you know, I think it makes some fishing better.
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. A couple of years ago, we had that warm spell in the south end of Champlain, went to mud.
Yeah.
And because we'd had a warm spell where the creeks really got riled up.
Yep.
Some warm or muddy water came in, and then the fishing died.
Yeah.
Everybody I talked to said, yeah, it's not even worth wasting your time because you couldn't see anything under the ice, and the fishing went to hell. So, you know, again, it's knowing your bodies of water and what had flow and what didn't.
Find that color line and be somewhere right there.
Yeah. No different
Which
in
is
the spring.
Impossible under the ice. But.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's, you know, you talk to a lot of the crappie guys, and they're waiting for that last safe ice before she goes to candle and going to fall apart on you. But those crappies are spring spawners. They're going to be headed for the shallows, and man, the bite.
It should be good this year because the ice is good. It should be a good year for that.
Yeah. Yep.
Should hang on just that little bit longer.
Yep, for sure. Well, any closing remarks and pointers you give to folks, or?
No, I just think, you know, everyone should be aware when they go on the ice, and you know, it's a lot of fun, and try it. You don't need all the expensive gear. You don't need, you know, you can ice fish with the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one thing that's different than, you know, boat fishing or rod and reel fishing is, my opinion, when you set up, you're stuck there for the day. So, so it's pick your spots carefully. You know?
It's making something of it, you know, and it doesn't, like you said, you don't have to have, you know, a $30,000 boat and all the equipment, and, you know, a handful of tip ups, or even a jig stick to go out with, you know, some maggots or a night crawler or something that you can go out and jig up panfish. And for kids, it's a blast.
Yeah. Oh,
you know? And I'm still getting phone calls from people that want to go ice guiding. I got one today. And we just aren't doing it anymore. And it's been less stress for us. And this year with the amount of snow, I'm doing as much snow plowing as I've ever done, as Logan has as well. So it's changed our priorities a little bit, but there's every year we get people that, I've never done this, I want to go out and see what it's all about, you know? So.
Well, and the other thing is time. My biggest thing is time is key doing it. You know, you learn the most by learning yourself.
Yep.
And that's it, you know. Trial and error. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good way to break the winter cabin fever.
For sure.
Get on the ice and the camaraderie of it, and you know, being out there and seeing Mother Nature. You guys saw an eagle today, and So you just never know. But yeah, it's been finally a winter of good traditional winter sports.
Yep.
And that's been great for our economy. And I think everybody's enjoying life right now and happy. I haven't talked to many people that are true dyed-in-the-wool New Englanders and aren't happy right now.
Yep.
So.
A couple more weeks, it'll be ready for spring.
Yeah. Maple sugar guys are tapping trees right now,
Yep.
and our first sap run's probably 10 days away by the looks of the forecast. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should be good for them too with the snowpack and
Heck
everything.
yeah. No, it should be great season. For me as spring fisherman, I think the lake fishing is going to be phenomenal. How our rivers go, I've got my doubts.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of runoff this year. So, especially out on Lake Ontario, the east end of Lake Ontario, Salmon River primarily, but all the tribs are going to be high this spring. They've got crazy amount of snow in the Tug Hill Plateau right now. But that's another subject in its own. So, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've always tried, as we talked about, keeping lively topics, changing things up, and it's nice to get some local lore. Just get people in it, got the passion, and want to get people involved. So, if anybody listening has got ideas on topics that they would like to see us do, please email us. Check out things that we've been doing. Andy and I are going to be going to the New Hampshire Outdoor Show, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. That's down just outside of Nashville, New Hampshire, which is a traditional outdoor show, not just fishing, but we're going to be talking with vendors there and doing interviews with people from all walks of life in the outdoor world. So stay tuned for that. But this is Captain Matt signing off. Thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Hey there, thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to head over to newenglandoutdoorlife.com to sign up for our mailing list. And while you're at it, check out thirdalarmcharters.com. That's third with the number 3. Have a great week, and we'll see you outdoors.